Downtown Los Angeles was enveloped in the morning hustle and bustle. Waves of commuters weaved through the valleys between skyscrapers. 8-year-old Tommy Parker, as usual, headed towards the back of Fresh Bites. Although just a corner of a major fast food chain, this particular store was special. Employees would occasionally place still edible food into special bags and leave them atop the trash bins. Tommy cautiously approached, his small frame shielded from the night's chill by dirty jeans and an oversized hooded parka. His brown hair, long and tangled in places, contrasted with his bright, intelligent blue eyes, which calmly observed his surroundings. As expected, a brown paper bag was placed on top of the trash bin. Tommy quickly grabbed it and checked inside. It contained warm hash browns and a ham and egg sandwich. His stomach growled, having not eaten since the previous night. However, he couldn't eat there. Holding the bag carefully, Tommy headed towards a nearby alley where his makeshift home of cardboard lay, simple, yet the only safe place he had. After breakfast, Tommy went back into the city to look for his next meal. He wandered around coffee shops and delis, but was met with cold stares and verbal abuse. "There's that dirty kid again," a middle-aged woman in an apron yelled from inside a store. "Get out of here. You're bothering the customers." Tommy fled as usual, his worn sneakers slapping against the sidewalk. Behind him, an employee's shouts echoed, "Don't come back." Tommy ducked into an alley, leaning against a wall to catch his breath. Life in the city was becoming harder by the day. There used to be kinder people here. When he begged on the streets, there were those who gave him coins or food. But lately, everyone treated him as a nuisance. That afternoon, Tommy was sitting on the sidewalk in front of Fresh Bites, a place where the staff wouldn't chase him away. Occasionally, the smell of fried food wafted out, taunting his hunger, but he was used to it. Suddenly, a black Mercedes pulled up in front of the store. A man in a perfectly tailored navy suit got out, James Wilson, the owner of the Fresh Bites chain, whom the employees deeply respected and occasionally visited the store for inspections. Tommy doesn't know his name, but the man is James Wilson. Tommy always watched him enter the store with admiration, captivated by his dashing presence. He is highly trusted by the staff, and his meticulous attention to every detail of customer service has inspired Tommy time and again. For a street-living boy, James was an unattainable figure. James strides confidently into the store. Inside, through the large glass windows, Tommy could see James talking with the employees. His expression was stern yet kind. Tommy was captivated by their interactions. "We need to improve our stock turnover. Providing fresh products to our customers is our mission." James's voice carried through the open door. The employees nodded seriously, their respect for James evident, especially among the younger staff who listened intently to every word. "Cleanliness and quality. That's our pride," James continued. "But we also need to address waste. Make sure to donate near-expiry products to food banks." Tommy's ears perked up. He knew this store occasionally disposed of still edible products. In a special way, a quiet act of kindness towards street dwellers like him. Even after the Mercedes left, Tommy remained seated. Passers-by pretended not to notice him. Occasionally, a man in an expensive suit would remark, "He ruins the scenery here," and a woman in a flashy dress would sneer, "He's a bad example for children." Security guards tried to drive him away. But Tommy never caused trouble. Instead, he would pick up litter around the area. Despite his surroundings, his eyes sparkled with hope. Someday, he wished to become an adult like the man from Fresh Bites, a fleeting dream that Tommy cherished in his heart. Catherine Bennett had just finished her work at the Fresh Bites headquarters and was accompanying James Wilson to inspect a new store. At 30, she carried a soft aura that belied her age. Her straight brown hair fell to her shoulders, styled neatly, and her deep green suit matched her warm eyes. Her competence as a secretary was acknowledged by everyone, but her behavior suggested a compassion that couldn't solely be explained by her professional excellence. Perhaps her upbringing in a facility had given her a deep understanding of human suffering. Her eyes were fixed on the small figure sitting by the roadside as usual. Amid the bustle of downtown, a young boy named Tommy sat on the street, gazing vacantly at the passing crowd. Catherine, who had seen him there before, found her gaze locked on this small figure. Whether under the harsh California summer sun or amidst the chill of winter nights, he was always there. Ms. Bennett, we're about 10 minutes away from the next site, the driver called out, bringing her back to reality as she continued to look out the car window. The shadows of the skyscrapers fell across the road, like a line dividing the wealthy from the have-nots. That evening, Catherine stopped by Fresh Bites alone, holding a takeout bag. She approached Tommy, who was sitting head down in front of the store. "Hello," her voice made Tommy look up in surprise, unaccustomed to someone like her speaking to him. "Aren't you hungry?" Catherine asked with a warm smile. Tommy shook his head warily. Living on the streets taught him not to trust strangers. "This avocado turkey sandwich is my favorite," Catherine continued casually. "It's loaded with organic veggies, and the bread is freshly baked every morning. Oh, and the sweet potato fries are recommended too, they're seasoned with honey and cinnamon." She smiled shyly. "But it's lonely eating alone. Would you like to join me in the park over there?" Fresh Bites was a chain that epitomized California's new food culture, featuring fresh vegetables from local farms, homemade dressings without additives, and environmentally friendly packaging. James's commitment was revolutionizing the fast food concept. Tommy hesitated at first, but Catherine's gentle gaze and the warm scent from the bag gradually opened his heart. Sitting on a park bench, Catherine shared her meal with Tommy. Initially reserved, he couldn't resist his hunger and gradually began to eat. "Is it good?" Catherine asked, and Tommy nodded slightly. The innocence of a child peeked through as he munched on the sandwich. "My name's Catherine." "What's yours?" "Tommy." Tommy's voice, frail yet firm, was heard for the first time. The warmth of the meal and Catherine's kindness slowly melted Tommy's defenses. He began to share his story in bits and pieces. A young woman who became a mother too soon, overwhelmed by childcare, with an uncertain father. At 4, his mother disappeared with a new lover, leaving Tommy with his grandparents. "My grandparents were kind at first," Tommy said, his gaze distant. "But then they started drinking." Life at his grandparents' home gradually became violent. Drunken outbursts from his grandfather and his grandmother's indifference worsened. At night, Tommy was locked in his room, barely fed. "I got scared and ran away." Tommy's voice trembled. "But I don't want to go back." Catherine listened quietly to Tommy's story, memories of her own at 13 years old resurfacing vividly. After losing her parents in a car accident, she and her brother Andrew spent days in a foster care facility until her brother, who had just turned 19, worked desperately to gain custody of her 6 years later. I have a similar experience, Catherine said gently. I lost my parents when I was 13 and was left alone with my brother. Life in the facility was, sometimes, very lonely. For the first time, Tommy looked up and met Catherine's eyes. But I had my brother. Having someone to support you is very important. The streetlights began to illuminate and evening shadows fell over the park. So Tommy, I want you to know that you are not alone. Something stirred strongly within her, moved by the courage and strength of an 8-year-old boy, forced to make the harsh choice of living on the streets and his similar loneliness. Tommy, can we meet again? Catherine asked gently. Shall we have lunch together here tomorrow? After a moment's thought, Tommy slowly nodded. In the twilight of the park, a small bond of trust began to form between them, marking the beginning of a special connection through shared understanding of each other's wounds. The morning sun in Los Angeles reflected off the Fresh Bites sign, shining brightly. James Wilson, aged 38, visited the store earlier than usual for his first inspection of the day. The employees straightened up upon seeing him. Good morning, Mr. Wilson, greeted a young manager rushing over. Good morning. James responded with a warm smile, his eyes already scanning the interior, not missing any minor disarray. The queue at the register, the movement in the kitchen, the cleanliness of the seating area, everything was evaluated through his gaze. How's the new ordering system we introduced last week doing? James asked the manager. Are all the employees managing it well? Yes, the average waiting time during busy periods has been reduced by 3 minutes. The manager reported proudly. Staff training is also proceeding as planned. James nodded in satisfaction. When he had taken over the business from his father 15 years ago, the chain had just 3 stores. Now, it had grown to over 50 locations. The secret to his success lay in uncompromising quality control and deep trust in his employees. Entering the kitchen, James saw the cooking staff working efficiently. He spoke to each one, occasionally checking their work and giving advice. The grilling on the chicken is very good, he told a veteran chef, whose face lit up. But let's lower the storage temperature of the lettuce. It will stay fresh longer. As lunchtime approached, the restaurant bustled with customers. James himself stepped into the kitchen to help during the rush, surprising the new staff with his presence in a high-end suit in front of the grill. At night, James returned to his downtown high-rise apartment. From his top-floor room on the 24th floor, he had a panoramic view of the Los Angeles nightscape. His residence was secured with surveillance cameras and a comprehensive security system. His smartphone rang, displaying Mom on the screen. James sighed deeply before answering. Mom, what's up? Jamie. I'm coming to your restaurant tomorrow. I'm bringing friends. So make sure we have a special table. Mom, my restaurant is a fast food place. We don't have special seating. James explained tiredly. Oh, my own son's restaurant? That's terrible. Jennifer's voice grew shrill. Do you know how much I've sacrificed for you? After hanging up, James stood by the window, gazing at the night view. He pulled out his angina medication from his pocket and swallowed a pill. The next day, as expected, Jennifer showed up in a flashy dress. Her normally eye-catching high-end brand dress was overshadowed by excessive accessories and overly heavy makeup. This coffee is lukewarm, she raised her voice at an employee. Her hands trembled slightly, her eyes unnaturally bright. I'm the owner's mother. Bring me a new one right away. When a young employee brought a new coffee. Oh, this is too hot, she intentionally dropped the cup, splashing it on the floor. Look at this. It's dangerous. I'll sue. Amid the confusion of the staff, Jennifer escalated her demands. The hygiene here is not up to standard. I'll tell my son and get you all fired. This table is not cleaned properly. Do it again. The atmosphere in the restaurant froze. Customers looked uneasy, and a few quietly left. A new employee stood, close to tears. When Catherine arrived at the scene, the staff were visibly shaken. Around Jennifer were broken glasses, spilled drinks, and scattered food, reflecting her disturbed mental state. Mr. Wilson, your mother. Catherine began to report, but James nodded with a deep sigh before she could finish. Fatigue, resignation, and deep sorrow were evident on his face. I know. I'm sorry. She's been really off lately. Once a different person. Jennifer had changed drastically in the year since his father's death. The once kind and compassionate mother now dressed flamboyantly, roamed the nights, and indulged in expensive shopping sprees, often begging James for money to cover her expenses. That night, James stood alone at the window of his high-rise apartment, his heart aching as he contemplated his mother's drastic change. The city lights twinkled below, but the pain in his chest was sharp. What had transformed her so profoundly? He still didn't have the answers. The following week, James left work early and headed to Jennifer's house. It was her 50th birthday, and he had her favorite Trader Joe's flower bouquet, and especially ordered cake from a luxury patisserie in Beverly Hills on the passenger seat. As he approached the residential streets of West Hollywood where she lived, memories flooded back. Before his father passed away, their house was the hub of family gatherings every weekend. Jennifer used to delight in hosting neighbors, serving homemade roast beef and apple pie. Back then, everything was so beautiful. James muttered to himself as he surveyed the neglected front yard. The rose bushes were wildly overgrown, and the lawn had turned a lifeless brown. The mailbox was overflowing with unopened letters. When I rang the doorbell, I sensed someone inside. But it took a while before the door opened. James? When Jennifer opened the door, she was clearly shaken to see her son. Her flashy makeup and expensive blouse erased any remnants of the modest life she once preferred. Happy birthday, Mom, James said with a broad smile, offering her a bouquet and a cake. I thought we could have a long talk today. Oh, thank you, Jennifer responded curtly, tossing the gifts onto a table near the entrance. But I'm busy right now. Let's do this another time. Mom, just 30 minutes. I also want to talk about Dad. I have plans today. Jennifer's voice suddenly rose. An adult of your age shouldn't always be needing his mother. Just then, a ringtone from a smartphone echoed inside the house, causing Jennifer's expression to stiffen. Is someone else here? James asked, to which his mother hastily shook her head. It's just the TV. Now, go on, I have to get ready. James left the house feeling pushed out. In the rearview mirror, he saw the curtains of a second-story window flutter as if someone had been peeking through. That night, James was flipping through an old album. In a photo taken a year ago, his mother smiled proudly next to him during the opening ceremony of a new store. What happened, he pondered, staring at the photo. His mother's transformation over the past year had been drastic. She donned expensive clothes and jewelry, frequented casinos during the day. And her demeanor toward her son had grown cold. His smartphone beeped. It was a text message from his mother. "I need $100,000 by tomorrow. Transfer it immediately." James stared at the screen, motionless. Last month, she had demanded $50,000 for an emergency. Attempts to get an explanation were evasive, and he had no idea what the money was used for. "If you need money, I want to know why." James carefully typed his response. "Aren't you rich? Can't you spare a mere $100,000? It's nothing compared to the 20 years I spent raising you." The reply tightened his chest. Indeed, Fresh Bites was successful, and he lived a wealthy life. However, his mother's demands were becoming unreasonable. Outside his window, the night lights of the city dotted the landscape, each illuminating someone's life. Yet the most crucial light in James's life seemed to be dimming slowly but surely. The afternoon sun intensified as a black Mercedes parked across from Fresh Bites. Inside, James discussed quality control with his employees. Tommy, who had been resting in his usual spot behind the store, was startled by a suspicious noise. Peeking through his makeshift window, he saw an elderly woman in a flashy blouse and expensive slacks loitering around the Mercedes. Tommy recognized her from occasional visits to the diner across the street. Checking her surroundings, she pulled out some tools from her bag and quickly slid under the car. The sound of metal being manipulated was faintly audible. After about 15 minutes, the woman finished her task and vanished into the bustling downtown crowd. "Please proceed with revising the store cleaning manual," James instructed his staff before stepping outside. Noticing James heading to his car, Tommy rushed over without hesitation. "Wait. You shouldn't get in that car." James stopped, puzzled, as Tommy approached. "A woman was doing something under your car with tools." "A woman?" James furrowed his brow. "What did she look like?" "She was in flashy clothes, often goes to the diner. Wore expensive-looking rings too." James's face momentarily stiffened, but soon he smiled gently. "Thanks for your concern, but it must be a misunderstanding. There are security guards around." "But it's true," Tommy insisted, although it seemed James didn't recognize him. As the engine started, Tommy ran. "Please, don't get in the car." His worn sneakers pounded the asphalt as the Mercedes slowly moved towards the main road. "Why won't he listen?" Tommy muttered as he ran. James, driving, noticed in the rearview mirror that Tommy was actually chasing him. Why would he go this far? Then, he felt something off. The brake pedal sank deeper than usual. "What is this?" Attempting to stop at an intersection, the car wouldn't slow down. In a panic, he tried the handbrake, but it failed. The road sloped downward, accelerating the car. "This is bad. Help!" Tommy's shouts echoed from afar as the car failed to navigate the intersection and crashed into a large tree on the roadside. The violent collision reverberated. Employees from a nearby clothing store rushed out. "Call 911. Someone get an ambulance." Tommy sprinted to the scene. The front of the car was severely damaged, and the airbag had deployed. James was unconscious in the driver's seat. "Someone help!" Tommy screamed, but the gathered onlookers only filmed with their phones, none stepping forward to help. With his small frame, he struggled to open the door and unbuckle the seatbelt. James's body was more than twice his size, but he pulled with all his might. "Please, move." After much struggle, Tommy managed to drag James out of the car. That's when he noticed the strong smell of gasoline. As sirens began sounding in the distance, smoke started rising from the car's engine compartment. Emergency responders arrived and quickly prepared to transfer James to a stretcher. "I want to go with him." Tommy tried to step forward, but whispers from the gathering onlookers reached his ears. "What's with that dirty kid? He must be trying to get something from the rich guy. Homeless kids are such a nuisance." One of the paramedics put a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "You pulled him out? That was brave of you." Tommy's eyes light up with hope. "Sorry, though, only family can ride in the ambulance. Please." Tommy's voice trembled. "I don't want to leave him alone." "Back off, kid," a man from the crowd shouted. "Stop bothering everyone." "Someone take care of this kid," another woman added. A young female paramedic crouched to Tommy's level and spoke kindly. "We're taking him to Cedars-Sinai Hospital. But promise me you won't do anything dangerous, okay?" Tommy nodded desperately, repeating the name of the hospital to himself. As police began investigating the scene, and bystanders continued to take photos, the boy started running. "There he goes, running away." Figures. But Tommy no longer heard their voices. He kept running with all his might, determined to watch over the person he admired. Only the sound of his worn sneakers hitting the pavement echoed his resolve. "Cedars-Sinai Hospital," Tommy muttered as he ran desperately. He crossed a major boulevard where luxury cars frequently passed, heading towards Beverly Hills. His nearly bare sneakers mercilessly transmitted the heat of the asphalt. When he reached the emergency entrance of the hospital, the sun was already setting. His hair was plastered with sweat, and his clothes were covered in dust. The receptionist frowned upon seeing him. I need to see the person brought in from the car accident." Tommy gasped for breath. "The one from the black car. Are you family?" The receptionist's gaze was icy. "No, but..." "Only family is allowed to visit," the receptionist said sternly. "And you can't enter the hospital dressed like that. It's a hygiene issue." As Tommy hesitated, the receptionist signaled to a nearby security guard. "What a filthy child." "Really?" Another staff member said dismissively. "Please leave. You're bothering the other patients." Driven out, Tommy lingered near the hospital entrance, overwhelmed. James Wilson. In the ambulance, he had heard the semi-conscious man muttering his own name. The name of the person he admired, discovered in such a tragic way. Every time the automatic doors opened, the scent of disinfectant wafted out. With each gust, Tommy straightened up, hoping someone would listen to his story. Yet, everyone entering the hospital either scowled at him or averted their eyes. Leaning against the cold wall, Tommy sat down and covered his face with his hands. He was the one who had dragged James out of the car. Why couldn't he see him? His eyes heated with tears he hadn't shed in a long time, though he had forbidden himself from crying on the streets. "I hope he's okay," Tommy whispered softly. The image of James's pale face as he was loaded into the ambulance was still haunting him. Such a strong man, now looking so frail. No one would tell him anything. No one believed him. As the building's shadow lengthened with the approaching dusk, Tommy felt no will to move. He couldn't bear to leave, feeling as if he might never see James again if he did. Tommy. At the sound of a familiar voice, Tommy turned to see Catherine rushing towards him. Why are you here? Don't tell me, it's about James's accident? Catherine. Tommy, who had managed to calm his tears momentarily, felt them welling up again. I pulled him from the car, but they won't let me in. Understanding the situation, Catherine hugged Tommy tightly. I've been looking for you. I heard about what you did from the paramedics and saw the videos taken at the scene. She then approached the reception, spoke briefly, and took Tommy by the hand. Let's go see James together. When they opened the door to room 301, James was lying in the hospital bed. His face marked with minor scrapes but alert. Catherine. James smiled, then noticed the small figure standing beside her. His expression shifted to one of profound remorse. You're the one from back then. It's Tommy. Catherine explained gently. The boy I've always talked about. He saved you today. Tommy. James slowly sat up. I'm really sorry, I didn't believe you. You said someone was under the car. If only I had listened. It's okay. Tommy said softly, his voice breaking. Just to know that you're safe. He choked up. Come here. James beckoned Tommy closer and gently placed a hand on his small shoulder. You were really brave. You managed to open that heavy car door, didn't you? I see you around the shop every day. Tommy's voice trembled. You're always kind to your employees, that's why. Catherine watched quietly, tears glistening in her eyes. You're a lifesaver. James's voice filled with deep gratitude and respect. But why did you go to such lengths? Because. Tommy looked up for the first time, meeting James's eyes directly. You're someone who sees even kids like me as people. A silence filled the room as James and Catherine were struck by the weight of the young boy's words. As twilight filtered through the hospital window, the three of them were silhouetted against the soft light, a trio brought together by fate. Several days after the accident, James appeared at Fresh Bites despite doctors advising him to rest. His passion for his work knew no bounds. Today, instead of his usual black Mercedes, he was driven in a car with a driver, still cautious about driving himself after the accident. Outside the store, as always, there was a small figure, Tommy. He was meticulously cleaning around the store, picking up litter from the street and planters, keeping the exterior pristine. His diligence was well regarded among the staff. Tommy. James called out, and the boy turned around with a joyful look. How about we grab some lunch together? Seated in a corner booth inside the restaurant, James ordered popular menu items. A grilled chicken sandwich made with organic eggs and Monterey Jack cheese. Sweet potato fries with honey and cinnamon. And a strawberry banana smoothie especially prepared considering Tommy's age, all signature dishes of the restaurant. This, James explained as he set the sandwich in front of Tommy, is made with fresh vegetables delivered daily from farms in California. The bread is baked right here in the store. The eyes of the 8-year-old sparkled. Used to leftovers or cheap fast food, the meal in front of him was a rare treat. Thanks for always keeping the area around the store clean, James said with a warm smile. Your help has really improved the shop's appearance. Tommy, his mouth full of sandwich, nodded slightly. The crispness of the fresh vegetables, the juiciness of the chicken, and the aroma of warm bread, everything was unlike anything he'd ever tasted. Actually, I've discussed it with the managers. We'd like to provide you with meals in the morning and evening. James continued seriously. It's not mandatory, of course. But we'd like to give back to a hard worker like you. From that day on, Tommy's life changed significantly. Every morning before the shop opened, he would clean the surrounding area and receive a warm breakfast from the staff. In the evening, he would do the same and then eat dinner. Sometimes, James or Catherine joined him. However, someone watched from a distance. Jennifer, dressed in a flashy blouse, observed the scene from a cafe across from her son's store. "Louis, look at that kid, acting as if he owns the place." From the other side of the smartphone, a man's calm voice resonated. "Yes, Jennifer. But that's irrelevant to our plans. But don't worry. In fact, it's better for us if your son is distracted by his charity work." After hanging up, Jennifer sipped wine from an expensive glass. A new diamond ring sparkled on her finger. At the next table, an elderly couple enjoyed their breakfast. "It's pension day today," Jennifer murmured. "It's going to be busy tonight." Downtown at night showed a different face from the day. In an alley a little away from the Fresh Bites headquarters, Tommy lay inside his cardboard house. Catherine had invited him home several times, but he hesitated. He had his reasons for choosing to live on the streets. The lights in the office dimmed as one employee after another left for the day. Tommy spotted Catherine among them. "Tommy, are you still up?" Catherine peered into the alley, her voice filled with concern. "It's going to be cold tonight. Are you sure you don't want to come home?" "I'm fine. I'll stay here a bit longer." Tommy shook his head. "James should be back soon. He's been inspecting the Long Beach store. But he said he'd return to headquarters later." Catherine left with a gentle smile. Hours later, a black car stopped in front of the headquarters. It was James. But as he started to get out, an unnatural light began to leak. From the windows of the building, it looked like flames. At that moment, an elderly woman hurried out of the entrance. Tommy remembered her, the woman who had tampered with the car. "It's urgent." "Catherine is still inside," the woman exclaimed. James immediately took out his smartphone and dialed Catherine's number. "She's not answering." His face tensed. He called again, but still no response. She was supposed to have left early today. James frowned, his suspicion towards his mother still unresolved. Yet, considering the possibility of a worst-case scenario, he felt compelled to check. "Wait!" Tommy shouted as he darted forward. "It's a lie. I saw Catherine leave. Don't go into the building." But James had already rushed inside. The woman smirked and disappeared from the scene. "Someone, call the fire department." Tommy cried out to passers-by, who began to dial 911. Tommy then followed James into the building. When he reached the second-floor landing, he found James clutching his chest and crouching down. "James." Tommy rushed to his side. "My medication." "It's in the car." "The orange bottle." James struggled to speak, evidently having an angina attack. Tommy raced down the stairs. The car door was not open. He peered through the window and saw the orange bottle near the driver's seat. But the doors were locked. "Open it. Someone open the car." Tommy pleaded desperately with the onlookers. As the fire alarm blared and the sprinklers activated, several men ran to the car and managed to open the door. On the second-floor landing, James leaned against the wall in pain. Tommy offered him an orange bottle. "Hurry." This is it, right? As the sound of sirens began in the distance and black smoke filled the hallway, Tommy desperately supported James. Amid the approaching sound of fire engine sirens, with black smoke rising from the second floor, James had taken his medication and was beginning to regain his breath, though he was not fully stabilized. Tommy was frantically trying to get him outside the building. "James, can you stand?" Tommy pulled on the man's arm. However, the size difference was stark. An 8-year-old boy's strength was barely enough to support an adult's weight. Outside the building, onlookers were starting to gather. Whispering while pointing their smartphone cameras, they said, "Look, that homeless kid is inside." "That dirty kid? Did he really go in to help? What can such a small child do?" Hot air rose up the stairs. Sparks landed on Tommy's arm, causing sharp pain. But he did not let go of James. "Please, someone help." As they reached the first floor, Tommy shouted through the glass at the people outside. But no one moved to help, though more cameras were raised than hands. Finally, firefighters burst from the arriving fire engine. As Tommy and James emerged from the building, a murmur rose from the crowd. Tommy's right arm was dotted with several red burn marks. His clothes were soot-stained, and his face had multiple abrasions, with blood oozing from his forehead. His palms were raw from dragging James, but he continued to support him determinedly. "He needs immediate treatment," a paramedic rushed over, his expression tightening upon seeing Tommy's burns. Those burns on the right arm looked deep. As James was placed on a stretcher, another paramedic checked Tommy's burns. Grimacing in pain, Tommy kept his eyes on James. "Lie down here," a female paramedic touched Tommy's shoulder. "You did well. But now, we need to take care of your injuries." Dazed by the heat and pain, Tommy looked towards James in the ambulance. The only clear thought in his mind was not wanting to lose someone important to him again. Firefighters entered the building, and gradually, the flames were brought under control. Amidst the crowd, someone murmured, "That kid really did something great." But the one who needed to hear that praise was no longer there. In the emergency treatment room at Cedars-Sinai Hospital, Tommy lay on a treatment bed. His right arm bore painful burn marks from the sparks, and his palms were raw from the abrasions caused by dragging. "Let's treat these burns first," a doctor carefully examined Tommy's arm. "Nurse, prepare some cooling gel and antibiotic ointment." Each application of disinfectant made Tommy wince, but he endured it stoically. "You also need stitches for the cuts on your forehead," the doctor continued, instructing the nurse while examining the wound. "The abrasions on your palms are quite deep. We'll bandage them. But you shouldn't use your right hand for a while." As the doctor gently cleaned the soot off Tommy's body, she added, "You have severe burns. But with a few days in the hospital and proper treatment, you'll be fine." She added with a smile, "Everyone here knows about your brave actions. You really did well." Tommy nodded slightly. In the next bed, James was undergoing an ECG. He could hear the doctors talking. "Mr. Wilson, you were timely with your angina medication." As dawn broke, Catherine rushed to the hospital. "It was terrible. I didn't notice the phone last night." "I'm sorry." Breathlessly, she looked worriedly at both Tommy and James. "I'm so glad you both are all right." "Catherine." James's voice was laden with fatigue. "I think it was probably my mother who did this." "Mr. Wilson," two detectives entered the room to discuss the arson case. We'd like to talk to you about the incident. James nodded quietly, but before he could speak further, doctors gathered around. We need to discuss Tommy's hospital charges, the lead doctor began. Since he's a minor without a legal guardian, I'll cover everything. James's voice was resolute. Tommy's treatment costs, hospital bills, whatever is needed. He saved my life, not once but twice. Catherine silently squeezed James's hand. Tommy looked at his bandaged hand on the bed. Does it hurt? Catherine asked, concerned. Should I get you an ice pack? Tommy shook his head slightly. It's okay. He hesitated, then added. But, about the money. Tommy. James interrupted gently. You've risked your life for me, twice. Now it's our turn to look after you. But I just. Tommy's voice trembled. Because you're always kind to your employees and even to a kid like me. Yes. Catherine smiled warmly. But you're special. Not many people would risk their lives to save others. Tommy had always refused to let anyone look after him, but at this moment, something in his heart began to change. The kindness shown by the people before him was different from any adult he had known before. Tommy. James spoke softly. I've only ever caused you trouble. But from now on, it's our turn to protect you. Protect me. Tommy repeated the words as if hearing them for the first time. Outside the window, the Los Angeles sunrise began to ascend. With the start of a new day, a new chapter was also about to begin for the three of them. Can I really be discharged? Really? Tommy's eyes lit up. On the third morning of his hospital stay, the doctor gave him permission to be discharged. His burns were healing well, and he could switch to outpatient treatment with bandages still on. However, James still needed to stay in the hospital for a while longer for detailed heart examinations. From his hospital bed, he smiled at Tommy. Tommy, I have something to ask you. James's expression was kind yet serious. Would you like to live with me once you're discharged? Tommy was startled, his eyes wide open. It was an unexpected proposal from the person he looked up to every day. But I still need a little more time to be discharged. James continued. In the meantime, would you stay at Catherine's place? Her brother Andrew also lives with her. He's a programmer and works from home, so you won't be alone. But, seeing Tommy's hesitation, Catherine gently spoke up. Andrew grew up in a foster facility just like me. I think he'll understand how you feel. Catherine's home was in a quiet residential area. It wasn't a large place. Just a two-bedroom apartment, but it radiated a warm atmosphere. Welcome. The door was opened by a man with a kind smile, appearing a bit older than Catherine. I'm Andrew. Catherine has told me a lot about you. Andrew's workspace was set up in one corner of the living room, dominated by a large desk with multiple monitors displaying colorful programming code. Oh, are you interested in computers? Noticing Tommy's intrigued gaze at the monitors, Andrew spoke. It's amazing. Tommy answered with awe. What's happening on the screens? It's cool, isn't it? My job is to give all these instructions to the computer. Andrew explained gently. I work here every day, so if you ever need anything, just let me know. Tommy nodded slightly. He felt his tension ease a little under Andrew's calm demeanor. Catherine watched warmly from the kitchen. Her brother, who had looked after her since she was 13 and continued to until she was 19, chose to work from home primarily for Catherine. Andrew being here helped me keep going. Catherine smiled softly. He always makes sure we have a proper warm breakfast, and if I'm late, he worries and keeps dinner warm for me. As days passed, Tommy gradually adjusted to life in their home. Andrew took breaks from his work to teach Tommy how to cook. When you cut vegetables like this, they cook faster. While making a soup loaded with California vegetables, Andrew explained carefully. Tommy watched intently, absorbing every detail of the knife's movement. During breaks, they'd play catch in the small backyard or peek into Andrew's work. As he showed Tommy the programming screens, Andrew would explain softly. Until James is discharged. Andrew looked into Tommy's eyes and said, "Think of this place as your home. Relax here. I'm always around for any questions." In the afternoon light streaming through the window, Tommy felt, for the first time, the true meaning of home. It was a place filled with the aroma of warm meals, where someone was always waiting. For him, a place where he could feel he was not alone. Detectives from the Los Angeles Police Department were investigating 2 attempted murder cases, tampering with a car that caused an accident, and arson at the corporate building. Both incidents appeared as perfect accidents, but traces of deliberate actions were evident. This is the surveillance footage. A detective showed James the video on a tablet in the hospital room. The footage was from outside the Fresh Bites store on the day of the first incident. It clearly showed someone crawling under James's car. The person was dressed in an expensive blouse with flashy decorations, matching the description Tommy had desperately tried to communicate to James at that time. Next is the surveillance footage from the corporate building. The detective played another video. Just before the fire alarm sounded, the same person entered the building and then hurried out minutes later. "Jennifer Wilson, your mother, right?" The detective's voice was calm but firm. Catherine squeezed James's hand, feeling his fingers tremble. "We've already searched her home, but she wasn't there," the detective continued. "However, we found some interesting evidence." Photos of documents found at Jennifer's home were displayed on the tablet. They included accounting documents from Crawford's Diner, numerous loan documents, and notes that appeared to be gambling records. Crawford's Diner. James muttered softly. "She's been frequenting that place recently." At that moment, the door to the hospital room was knocked on. "Excuse me," a young officer entered and whispered something to the senior detective. The detective's expression changed. "Mr. Wilson, we've just received word. Jennifer Wilson has been apprehended at Crawford's Diner. The owner, Lewis Crawford, is also being questioned." Catherine gasped softly. "Do you know about their relationship?" the detective asked James. "No," James shook his head wearily. "She's changed so much over the past year. I don't understand why this is happening." The police had arrested Jennifer Wilson on charges of 2 counts of attempted murder. James was still struggling to accept the reality of his mother's arrest. The deep darkness behind why his mother tried to kill him was yet to be fully uncovered. In the interrogation room, an exhausted Jennifer began to confess everything, revealing how her affection for her son had twisted over time. "A year ago, I was dining alone." Jennifer's voice trembled. "At Crawford's Diner. That day, the diner had fewer customers than usual. Jennifer sat alone at the counter, with the owner, Lewis, standing in front of her. "Are you by yourself today?" Lewis's voice was soft and inviting. "I see you here often, but you seem lonely today." "Yes." Jennifer managed a wry smile. My son is always busy with work, and I hardly see him these days. Your son? James Wilson. He's with Fresh Bites. Oh, the successful young entrepreneur. Louis's eyes sparkled with interest. But with him being so busy, you must feel quite lonely. From then on, Louis started treating Jennifer as a VIP. He offered her samples of new menu items and warmly welcomed her even at closing time. Then, one evening, "There's a private room for special guests like you." Louis guided Jennifer to a back room of the diner. Inside were wealthy-looking patrons, laughing and playing cards. "It's just a bit of fun." Louis smiled gently. "Your son has been very successful. It's only right for you to have some enjoyment too." It started with small bets. However, as the stakes grew, so did the thrill of victory and the desperation of defeat. Soon, Jennifer found herself out of savings. "It's okay. James will help you out." Each time she said this, Louis smirked knowingly. "Of course. Your son is wealthy, after all." Gradually, Jennifer began to ask her son for money. At first hesitantly, but then more aggressively. When James resisted, she would create scenes at his store. The situation took an unexpected turn when gambling in the diner's back room led to an elderly man losing all his assets and subsequently taking his own life. James had a connection to this man as he had been scouting the area for a new store location. By chance, he witnessed Louis extorting Social Security checks from the elderly man. The family of the elderly man filed a lawsuit, and James was called as a key witness. "If this comes to light, our arrangement ends." Louis's voice no longer had any trace of kindness. "Your debts will become public. Are you okay with that?" Cornered, Jennifer found herself deeply indebted and increasingly dependent on Louis. She then made the worst decision possible. If only there were no testimony, if only James weren't there. In the interrogation room, Jennifer wept. "What have I done?" The police investigation gradually exposed the dark realities of Crawford's Diner. The exploitation of the elderly on pension day. The sophisticated illegal gambling. And all while a mother contemplated murdering her son to maintain her lifestyle. Several weeks after the interrogation, the initial trial for Jennifer Wilson and Louis Crawford began. Jennifer was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and arson, while Louis faced charges of operating illegal gambling, exploiting the elderly, and conspiracy to commit attempted murder. The prosecutor highlighted the methodical targeting of the elderly for illegal gambling and related attempts to eliminate a witness as particularly egregious. Both accused pleaded guilty. Jennifer received a 20-year sentence, and Louis, 25 years. James did not appear in court. The reality of his mother's trial was something he still could not fully accept. The sunlight of spring filled the hospital room. James's discharge day was nearing. Today, like every other day in the past few weeks, Tommy visited the hospital with Catherine, his daily routine of offering support. "Tommy," James spoke softly, "I have something to tell you." Tommy sat down, tense. The days he had spent in Catherine's home had taught him the warmth of a family, though he had thought it only temporary. "I want to adopt you." James's voice was kind but certain. "Of course, how you feel is what matters most. I don't want to force you." Tommy's eyes widened. He had chosen the streets for a reason. Abuse from his grandparents and a lost trust in others. but his life had dramatically changed over the past few months. But me? Tommy's voice shook. Are you sure? You saved my life. Twice. James smiled. But that's not why. The more I've gotten to know you, the more I've wanted to make you my son. I have something too, Catherine said with a gentle smile. James and I are engaged. Tommy's eyes sparkled. That means, Catherine continued, we three can become a new family. Family. Tommy repeated the word as if it were a precious treasure. How about starting a new life as James Wilson's son? James extended his hand. We'll make sure you can go to school. To catch up, we'll arrange a tutor for you. Slowly, Tommy took James's hand, his hesitation gone. The spring light streaming through the window seemed to bless the birth of this new family. After Tommy was adopted, the Wilson family's life was filled with joy. Initially hesitant, Tommy gradually adapted to school life. With dedicated support from a tutor, Tommy quickly absorbed his studies. On weekends, Andrew, a programmer, taught him math. His logical explanations were perfect for Tommy. Tommy also excelled in sports, quickly becoming a regular on the school soccer team. James and Catherine always came to cheer him on during games. Sometimes, Andrew also took time from work to support him and brought homemade sandwiches. Great job, Tommy. After the game, James hugged his son, not minding the sweaty and muddy uniform. On weekends, the family would go on trips or participate in local volunteer activities. Tommy was especially active in serving meals to the homeless, motivated by his own experiences to help those in need. Andrew's nutrient-rich soups were always well received. James underwent successful heart surgery and was in good health. At his and Catherine's wedding, Tommy proudly served as the ring bearer. And Andrew was the best man. This is what a real family is, Tommy muttered quietly one evening after finishing his homework, looking at everyone relaxing in the living room. James and Catherine smiled warmly at him. And Andrew came from the kitchen with warm cocoa, gently ruffling Tommy's hair. The bond that began as a temporary stay had grown into something unbreakable. 10 years had passed, and Tommy was now a college student. He was studying business at the University of Southern California and interning in product development at Fresh Bites on weekends. His experience living on the streets gave him a unique perspective. This price range is accessible to everyone. I'm working on a new program to provide warm meals to the homeless. In the conference room, Tommy presented confidently, his maturity beyond his 18 years evident. Across the table, James listened proudly to his son's proposals. Now fully recovered from his heart surgery, James bore the scar on his chest as a quiet testament to the events of a decade ago. Back home, Catherine's warm smile awaited him. She continued working as a secretary while caring for their 8-year-old daughter Sarah and 5-year-old son Michael. On a Sunday afternoon, the Wilsons hosted a barbecue in their yard. Andrew and his partner joined in, with Andrew showcasing his cooking skills by grilling marinated vegetables. Even as a programming school instructor, his culinary skills were sharp. "Big brother, is the meat ready?" Sarah tugged at Tommy's sleeve. "Just a bit longer." Tommy patted her head gently. "Mr. Bennett." Michael ran over. Andrew was teaching a kids' programming class, which Michael attended. "What are we making next?" "Let's see." Andrew replied with a smile. "Next, we'll try making your favorite game." Michael cheered and ran back to play, occasionally returning to cuddle with Catherine. Tommy, I have some good news, James said, standing by the grill. The board has approved the homeless support program you proposed. Tommy's eyes lit up. Really? Yes. Starting next month, it will be implemented in all our stores. Your experiences made this proposal possible. Catherine brought over some lemonade, shining golden in the sunlight. I have an idea, Tommy said shyly. I'm thinking of starting a project to support the independence of homeless people through the university's entrepreneurship program. That's wonderful. Catherine's eyes sparkled. We'll support you fully, James reassured, putting an arm around his son. Laughter filled the yard. The boy who once wandered the streets unloved was now a beloved big brother. And a son making his parents proud, embarking on a new dream supported by the programming skills Andrew had taught him. Looking up at the sky, Tommy felt as if he finally understood why he was at that place on that fateful day 10 years ago. It was meant to bring him to this family. In this vast circle of family, Tommy felt a profound sense of happiness.